Today's guest is Austin Hurwitz. This is actually one of my favorite conversations. What I love most about this conversation with Austin is his authenticity and his passion for what he does. Austin is currently the head of strategy and business development at Doodles. Those of you who don't know, Doodles is actually one of the more successful NFT projects in the space and is really doing the work to expand beyond the Web3 universe to being a global brand. And Austin has been instrumental in that and been responsible for some of their amazing partnerships with other companies such as Camp and Crocs. But he's got so much passion when he talks about this brand and what the future holds for Doodles. It was a really great conversation. We discussed how he entered the space, his time at Amazon Music, to working with Troy Carter over at Venice Music, and then eventually landing in Web3 at Doodles. He was a holder from day one, and to have worked his way through the community and now to head of strategy and business development is really quite a wonderful journey. He's got what I consider to be one of the smartest minds in the space. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Austin. I hope you all enjoy it. Austin, thank you for joining us here on Proof of Culture. Really great to have you. So I'm deeply appreciative of your time. Right out the gate, let's get started. What is your origin story? How did you make it here to Web3?
Gosh, well, thank you for having me. Excited to be here. Origin story, the short version for me started back in around 2017. I was working at Amazon Music at the time, leading independent label licensing. And as part of our launch for Amazon Music Unlimited, I had the wonderful responsibility of figuring out if we were in license for all the music that we were going to distribute on Amazon Music. So without boring people as to the music licensing landscape, the main thing that you need to know is there's basically a record with the Library of Congress, the Copyright Office, as to if you have a license for tracks on the publishing side. Mm-hmm. And it's incredibly archaic. Most people don't actually fill it out. For those that may be familiar with it, it's like a lot of songs aren't even fully licensed by the time they even go out. Splits aren't finalized. It's really like a mess. And at the time, there were statutory damages for people that would put out music that they didn't have a full license to. So you could not be in the wrong, and there's no license available, and you could still end up getting dinged with some pretty serious fines. And that was kind of the first time I realized how broken the music industry was.
It sounds tedious.
Super tedious. No ledger of record, right? Like this information exists like all over the place. It exists on like people's servers. There's no one place for everyone to see all this information, and it ultimately ends up putting the risk on people who want to provide products and services. So it was in that process that I actually started hearing about some of the first wave of like Web3 music companies. These were like the Ujo Musics and the Dot Blockchain VCs that were really focused on how could you bring this licensing on chain. Which was a acute need that I immediately felt after spending, hours and hours every day for weeks trying to figure out if we were in license for tens of millions of songs at the time. So that initially piqued my interest. I ended up writing a white paper at Amazon as to the licensing implications of crypto and put forward some recommendations on some exploratory work that we could do as this was coming online. From there, did some dabbling and crypto trading. And then the crash of like 2018 happened, kind of took a backseat, went on with the rest of my life, ended up moving down to LA, working for Troy Carter and Susie Rue's Venice Music, which is an independent music distributor, and really didn't find my way back into crypto until the winter of 2021, which for those that remember, this was like the NFT craze that was going off with NBA Top Shot and then Bored Ape. And I remember desperately trying to get like these Top Shot packs and failing miserably every time. But it was through this process that I initially started noticing this independent music wave that was happening on Web3. And there was an artist by the name of Spotty Wi-Fi who had used his CryptoPunk to create an entire brand around his NFT, and was doing really, really well at the time. There was an article in Pigeon and Plains, which for those that were around during the blog boy era, that will be a name that they remember. They did this full cover story on him, and I sent it to Troy and Susie. Basically with like hey, I don't know exactly what to make of this, but there's definitely a trend happening that I think we should get on top of and pay attention to. So I went from managing our product team to really diving into Web3 full time from there. So diving into all the different communities, buying my first PFPs. That's actually how I got involved in Doodles to start. I was there from the week of Mint to developing our own Web3 strategy and ultimately launching the first NFT for music distributors. So you would buy the NFT as an artist or a manager, and you'd be able to access our SaaS product to distribute your music, collect your royalties, give you access to our community, to a recording studio. So it was really like the first of its kind. So that was how I dove into Web3. And then I ended up leaving Venice last summer just to take a little break, do some consulting work. And it was during that process that I got put in touch again with the founders at Doodles and Julian Holgan, the CEO. They were really looking to have someone come in and think through business development and strategy. So I have been at Doodles since the top of the year.
Awesome. So two things about what you said. First is working with Troy and Susie, which I also did at Cross Culture Ventures. I was the EIR over there working with those two. But secondly, it seems like what you're doing now with Doodles is so completely different. You've been pretty immersed in the music space, right? What do you think Web3 can really bring to the music industry? Because I think that I've been hearing from people how much the music industry is waiting to be disrupted by something like Web3. Do you really think that possibility exists?
Yeah, if I had the exact blueprint, I probably would still be working second. We'd see a lot more product market fit. I think that the reality is Web3 music is very much in its infancy and really looking for a variety of different value propositions to go solve for. I think we often, for those that have spent time there, recognize that there are a lot of things that are broken within the music industry, particularly for independent musicians, whether it is how the contracts are set up, how they're getting paid, the timeline or the lag and how long it takes to get paid. They're not having access to fan information. You sell tickets through Ticketmaster. You typically don't get that information of who actually attended your shows or who bought your merch, to how you interact with your fans on socials, and ultimately you not owning that social graph. So there's a lot of different use cases directly within music as it relates to fandom and monetization and ownership. A lot of first principles that exist within crypto, I think, lend themselves really well to solving some of these pretty big, hairy problems within music. And there are a host of different protocols and companies and artists that are building in that space and looking to continue to develop over time. So yeah, I think, as I look at the current Web3 landscape, I'm encouraged by a multitude of developments, whether it be what Medallion is doing and really giving artists control of their fan pages, and taking that control back from platforms and doing it in a very Web 2.5 way. They've seen some pretty remarkable traction pretty early on, to Sound XYZ's mandate of really just putting music on chain and creating that permanent record of provenance and fandom. I think we'll just continue to see a lot of iteration over time. So yeah, I'm encouraged by what I see so far. It's still very, very much in its infancy. And for a lot of crypto use cases overall, I think if we're going to see mainstream adoption, it has to start with the experience, not the technology. Yeah, and you're starting to see that more.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Let's talk a little bit about your incredible trajectory. You went from being a member of the Doodles community. You mentioned that you were there. You minted first day, and now you're head of strategy and BD. Let's talk a little bit about that progression, because I think for most people, that's pretty inspiring. I'm curious just how the whole thing transpired and really how you see your role there.
Like I said, I was early in the Doodles community. I I was in the week of mint. I didn't mint, but I bought my first Doodle. It was a pickle the week of mint. I ended up meeting the co-founders at NFT NYC, I believe 2 weeks after that, and got to spend some time with them. And from there, kind of our relationship blossomed through different events, through Twitter Spaces and Discord, and really just like finding a home in Web3 through Doodles. So very much kind of like a known quantity on both sides when it came time to actually think through like what a role could look like. And there was just like a level of comfort and trust. So it was a very unique onboarding experience in that, you know, I joined at the top of the year. I flew down to Miami. At the time, the team was basically like a 2-pizza team. There were like 8 people around the table as we were getting ready for a key launch. You know, now the team is almost 60, and looking around the table, I knew every single person that had individual stories I could tell about every person. So it was definitely like a comforting environment. And then, you know, as I think about my role, it's similar to a lot of startups where your title can be one thing, but ultimately you see across a lot of different departments and have a lot of different responsibilities that can change. You know, the needs of the company change. So for me, it's very much like serving to drive a lot of our strategic conversations, doing a lot of internal operations to get everyone on the same page, and then executing new business opportunities, and really just serving as a sounding board for the CEO and for the co-founders. And I think that just comes from being in the office every day, so to speak, and seeing where the opportunities are and where my skill sets align with that, and be able to help out where I can.
I've been involved in various communities in Web3, from Palm to the Cool Cats, and community is a huge, huge deal in the space. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what do you think makes the Doodles community special? I mean, of course, everyone's going to say, look, our community is great, our community is special. But for you, you've got a very unique vantage point from being involved from the very beginning to where you are now. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what do you think makes the Doodles community special?
Certainly. Well, they're definitely one of the more creative communities that I've come a part of. And our mission is really about spreading positivity and joy in the space. And I think that's no more important than during a bear market. And they certainly align with that ethos that I see so much fan art and people coming together and helping one another to, you know, the events that they put on themselves. Like, they're very much like leaned in and see the opportunity of the brand both within and outside of Web3, and really serve as our front line of support and really looking to bring the brand to new heights. So I've continually been amazed by the level of both creativity and ownership and expertise within the community. You know, we are constantly looking for ways to elevate members of the community, whether that be having host events that we are lucky enough to support, to actually through the incubator being able to put some funding into business ideas that they have, to actually bringing some of the artists that we've seen within the community on board through our artist in residence program. So I think it's just it's a very talented community that all have, you know, incredible backgrounds in their own right, that are also bought into the mission of spreading joy and building this brand. So I think that's really what sets it apart. They show up every day, and they really are an extension of the team.
You know, I always say that Web3 communities are demanding and probably a little more entitled than other communities, and I think that is largely because they understand the value of what they bring. How do you and the team balance giving the community what it needs versus the needs of the business? Because I'm sure that they don't always align. So how do you strike that balance between, you know, what the community wants versus where you're heading with the business?
I don't think it's something that any project has completely nailed, and ultimately a lot of that comes down to the maturation of the space. I think for a lot of people, this is, you know, Web3 is like 2 years old when it comes to like these PFP projects, and so we're all learning together. I think, you know, for us, we try to communicate as clearly as we can while also giving ourselves the breathing room to have a strategy that continues to iterate with the world around us. And ultimately, I think for holders, like, they may have preconceived notions or assumptions about why they initially bought into the project, and that may change. And so they need to continually reassess, is where the brand going, ultimately why I decided to buy in or not. And I think that's like kind of a give and take on both sides. But, what we try to do is clearly communicate as much as we're able to. Obviously, we can't share everything.
Sure.
Take in feedback where we can, but also remain steadfast in our vision of what we're trying to build, and know that over time, that will lend itself to people gravitating towards that mission.
Yeah, I recall some drama, I would say, in the past with regards to not keeping the community adequately apprised of what was happening. And I know quite a few of the larger projects have had the same thing where the community's like, oh, you haven't tweeted in, 6 months or whatever. But it appears that Doodles has recovered quite nicely, actually. What did the process of repairing that relationship with the community look like?
That effort really started in earnest when we had some key hires come on at the top of the year, who were able to lend their perspective from the community or from other positions that they came into. One key hire was Bianca, who was our head of marketing, and did a phenomenal job kind of just outlining, how we could better communicate, how we speak to the community, what platforms and channels we do that in, and really establishing an operating process for that. I think, what was evident is, these were, like I mentioned at the beginning, we had like roughly 8 people that were here at the top of the year to the scale that we're at today, which is obviously exponentially bigger. And people were just really stretched thin, and they needed additional help in domain expertise to do this the right way. So they were doing the best that they could, but they were certainly open to feedback and iterating. And yeah, a lot of that just came from leaning in early, establishing a direct line of communication with the community through Doodle sessions, which were Twitter spaces that we host for people to ask questions, to give updates on what we have going on, to establishing a community council so that we had people directly from the community, with a direct line to the Doodle team. They were also responsible for revamping our Doodle Bank, which gives people an opportunity to actually use company funds to start up businesses, host events, and really be able to prop themselves up. And then it also just doing more consistent feedback. So whether, I hosted several like video sessions, I sent out a survey, just continuing to make sure that we're really in sync with how the community is feeling, and that they have a voice that they feel that they can vocalize their thoughts. So it's an ongoing thing that we're working through, and continue to look to iterate and improve. Where we are today is not where we want to be in the future, but I'm really proud of the progress we've made in the almost 9 months since I came on board.
Proof of Culture is brought to you in part by Zora, the place to bring your imagination on chain. Visit Zora.co to get started. Connect, click, create. And now back to our interview.
You touched on a few of the initiatives that y'all have going on. I think you mentioned the incubator and the Artists in Residence program. I'd love for you to expand a little more, talk a little bit more about the incubator. Is that something that is primarily for holders in the community? Is it open to all? Also with the Artist in Residence program, maybe talk a little bit more about those initiatives that y'all have set up and how they're meant to further engage with the community.
Yeah, so this was necessarily a pet project of mine, and one that I was really excited about iterating on and coming on board. Actually, the initial conversations that I had, both within Doodles and then with Julian, as we were talking through what my role would be here, was around the Doodle Bank. Yeah, I initially bought into the project because I saw a lot of the opportunity through the bank of, okay, we're effectively operating as like a semi-DAO to be able to put forth different ideas that can help elevate the brand and ourselves. And that was something that felt very aligned with how I wanted to operate within the space and trying to be a builder. And so, our initial conversations were actually around, do I come in to consult and think through how the Doodle Bank could be more effectively used? Because one of the issues I was noticing as a holder before even coming on board was the process by which proposals were going through the pipeline was pretty broken. We didn't have a really strong sense of being able to ensure there was like a high quality bar for proposals. And then the key thing to remember is a lot of holders don't want to participate in something like that. And so we ultimately, for one reason or another, right? Like they're not in the space every day, they've got lives or whatever going on. And so you end up with a pretty low participation rate, which is ultimately a detriment to the people that are here every day who do want to build. That being a deterrent is unfortunate. And so when I came on, it was definitely top of mind and really aligned well with how we wanted to continue to give the community more opportunities to participate within the Doodles ecosystem. We were able to bring in outside help from Kai Turner, who actually built out the Meebits DAO early on in Web3 to build a structure that was ultimately going to improve the quality of proposals, ensure that they were aligned with the mission and ethos of Doodles, and to give more oversight and ultimately resources to the proposals that do get approved. So in that, we developed what is now called the incubator. It is run by the community. So we have a council chair, a treasurer, a head of grants, a head of rewards, and a head of events that oversee everything. We also have 2 watch members, which are individuals who basically act as like board observers. So they join every meeting, they ask questions, they do minutes, they send it out to the community. And so they oversee like the day-to-day operations. They actually collectively built the MVP of the product, which is incredibly amazing to see and just shows to the amount of talent we have within the community. And what it's allowed us to do is really define what type of proposals that we're looking for. So instead of it just being a blank slate of, okay, we have this treasury, like just put forward any type of proposal, we can make sure that the types of interest we're getting are very much aligned with where we're trying to go as a brand. So one of those pillars is bringing people together. So how do we create a framework for people to put on events, particularly around areas where we know where we're going to be? So perfect example being camp. We had our OG holder preview last week. And we had like a call to action for people to put on events. So our community members put on like a putt-putt event. They put on a Cubs game. There was like a boat tour. And it was a way for there to be this ecosystem of events around our holder preview where we knew people were going to be in Chicago. It's also enabled our community holders that may not be based in the States to start getting together more and have some funds to do so. So currently right now there's a event going on for Korea Blockchain Week. We were also able to fund the holders going to a crypto conference in Korea last month that I actually spoke at. So they were able to come for free and things like that. So there's events is a key pillar. Another pillar is around content creation, and we're actually able to really drive the awareness of the brand through content creation. So there's been 2 requests for proposals that have gone out so far. So this is where the team has an idea or they have something that they need help with, and they put basically the bat signal out of like, hey, we have a bounty. This is what we're looking for help for. You can submit your proposal for that, and we'll ultimately end up picking some winners. So as it relates to content creation, we have the Artist in Residence program, which is basically come get a crash course in animation from Golden Wolf and Doodles. Wow. We have our first, so it's like a pretty great program just for like anyone who's in the community who has like a strong interest in animation. You're effectively getting taught by some of an Emmy award-winning animation studio and getting to spend time with them every day. So one of our first Artist in Residence is our dude who's been like a fixture in the community since the very beginning, and he's gotten firsthand experience with actually now developing content for the community. And then we also did a content creation RFP for camp. So we paid for people to come and do interviews, to create video content, blogs, and across the community for OG holders to come out and be part of that experience and actually get paid to do so. And then the last piece that we're really, and honestly, this is of all of them, the one that I'm the most excited about, is how can we actually incubate businesses using the Doodles IP? So you have a Doodle that you own, you want to create some sort of product or service. How can we elevate that offering and really give you the resources that you need to be able to prop that up and give you an audience for it? So whether that is, creating CPG products to creating any type of game, how can we like give you some funding to set that up? So that is just recently launched as of like 2 weeks ago. So we're starting to get the first set of proposals around people that want to build different things with their IP that hopefully we'll have online in the coming weeks.
That is very cool. Really great way to just engage the community and reward them as well. I recall there was an instance, I don't know when it was. It was a while ago. And I think one of the founders, he tweeted something about Doodles not being an NFT project. And I know that caused some ripples, not just, I'm sure, in your community, but I'm sure across the entire NFT ecosystem, as everybody was talking about it. But I think to some degree, right, for NFTs to really hit the mainstream, some of that must be true. Like, you can't just be an NFT project, right? There's the need to sort of shift and adapt to basically become a brand, right? You've got this IP, and it's really about appealing to a broad cross-section of people who may or may not be in this space. And so I wonder where you stand on that thought. Like, we can't just be an NFT project. We have to be more than that. Do you think that projects need to become more like brands?
Yeah, I mean, look, like, I think the main point that Jordan was looking to communicate is ultimately, if we're going to build a sustainable business and a brand, it does need to extend beyond Web3. And I mean, you can look just at the market dynamics that exist today, right? Like, there are no royalties. It's really hard to build like revenue or any sort of like sustainable business off of NFTs alone. I don't think anyone is looking to do that. You can look at projects across the ecosystem, and it's very clear that they're all looking to extend into verticals that can be more sustainable.
Right.
With that being said, like, our core mission hasn't changed. Like, we really believe that Web3 is an opportunity to reinvent the relationship between fans and the brands that they love, and to give them more ownership in those brands, as to being able to track their provenance and see how they grow along with the brand, and be able to take some benefit in that as well. So that certainly hasn't changed. I think we constantly talk about what does fandom look like? What does co-creation look like? What does it look like to build and incubate a brand with a community from day one? All of those things remain core to who we are, and Web3 will remain core to who we are, and how we look to support OG holders and what we do. So yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in what he said about how we look to grow the business. I mean, literally on Friday, we announced details of our Crocs partnership. Brands like Adidas and Human Race and Human Made. We just launched a physical retail location in Chicago with Camp. And so we're doing a lot of things that like would not have seemed fathomable to just an NFT project a couple years ago. So it really is looking to build a timeless brand that reinvents how fans come into contact with it on a daily basis.
Because you touched on this, I feel the need to ask about it. You mentioned royalties, and certainly one of the biggest shakeups in the space lately has been, OpenSea and some other platforms. Basically, it looks like creator royalties are going away, which I know for many artists, that was one of the major appealing things about Web3, right? And creating art on the blockchain was the ability to get some revenue in perpetuity from something that you create. How does this affect a brand like Doodles, if at all, something like royalties going away?
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone's affected by it. It's just like less revenue coming in. But fortunately, we have never looked at royalties as a sustainable business model. A variety of reasons for that, right? If you build an incentive by which royalties are the engine of your company, then you're effectively looking for your NFTs to change hands, which is not what we want at all. Like, I think ultimately barometer of success for us would be that people are not listing their doodles and they're holding them forever because they love the brand so much. So royalty for us was never the end all be all, but obviously it has an impact in just like where revenue comes from. And I think we got a pretty early jump on how to think about sustainable revenue streams outside of royalties. I ultimately think it's a shame what's happening. I originally got into Web3 in part because of what royalties could mean for artists in particular. And I remember often telling my friends, the opportunity, particularly like in the art world, of being able to see the benefit of your art accumulating value over time.
Right.
There's all of these stories of famous artists today that would sell their artwork, whether it was through, an art house or otherwise, for a very minimal fee, only for it to be, worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in the future. And they get no royalty on that.
Yeah.
And ultimately they were responsible for seeing that accrual in value. So I think that is more of like a fundamental question / disappointment that I have is hoping that we can get to a place of royalty enforcement. But for me, it comes less from our own position and more of just I see such a benefit for creators overall in the space to be able to benefit from this.
Yeah, my go-to use case on that has always been Kerry James Marshall in his big sale where one of his pieces sold for $20 million. And then we later found out that it was I think P. Diddy who bought it. And when I try to illustrate Web3, particularly for artists, I explain to them how Kerry James Marshall didn't get any of that. You can have a piece that sells for 20 million and not see one penny because, you're no longer involved in the life of that piece as it evolves and continues and your career grows and your pieces gain value. A sale like that, you can net nothing. So I definitely agree with you that it's a bit of a shame, but hopefully we'll see some changes for the better. But I want to jump back to the brand partnerships. You mentioned Camp and recently Crocs. I'm curious how some of these partnerships came about. How involved were you in this process? And is it really about onboarding the next million or the next billion and bringing Doodles as a brand to people that are not in the NFT space? Is it really about just going far and wide with the name of the brand? Some of these partnerships. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I have to give a huge hat tip to my coworker, Brandon Rosenblatt, who is head of brand partnerships and has really been instrumental in driving a lot of those. And we work hand in hand in thinking through the strategy and the go-to-market and ultimate execution of those. But he's been at the forefront of the actual deal flow and bringing those to the table. I think as we think through the goal of brand partnerships overall, obviously the brand building that we're able to do, the acquisition and awareness of the brand, I think for us, these help to define a place in which Doodles speaks to culture and is a part of culture in an everyday way in doing that with partners who really get where we're trying to go as a brand. So yeah, that's kind of the lens by which we look at them. Can we find people who just outside of Web3 find a real strong affinity for the IP, which we believe is one of the strongest in the space? Can we get that in the hands of more people? I mean, we talk about how we want to see a doodle in every home, and to do that, being able to leverage the distribution and brand integrity of a lot of these partners is pretty critical as we look to create and grow our own footprint.
Assuming that there is some desire to cross over for mass appeal, how would you describe the target consumer for Doodles?
We see our current holder base and skews, as crypto does, a little bit millennial. We actually have a pretty even male female split, which is pretty unique in
that is unique.
Web3.
Yeah,
very 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 unique for sure, and that shows that. So I think that a lot of it lends itself to the art style, the character traits, and having a more holistic demographic approach. But we talk about adult as being our core demographic. So these may be parents who are millennials and they want to experience or show kids the same IP that they grew up loving to, people that watch shows like Adventure Time and Rick and Morty. It's really an IP that can scale itself up and down in terms of tone, depending on the audience. So, I mean, you look at some of the historical examples of that, whether it be a Star Wars or anything from Marvel, where they can come in a variety of different formats for kids of different ages and adults. Or you look at something like an Illumination and Minions of how it's geared towards kids, but obviously there are so many adult hidden jokes within them. I mean, they literally have like the bank is called Lehman Brothers in the first Minions movie. So there's a lot there. And I think we're generally targeting millennial, Gen Z, and collectors and people that are looking to really lean in with the brand. But we're going to continue to do these experiments like Camp, where we can introduce the IP to a different demographic and see how they identify with it and take a lot of learnings from that as well.
Mm-hmm. What's the big vision for Doodles? Like, where do you see the brand in the next, 5, 10, 15 years?
I mean, the vision is to be one of the most recognized and loved IPs in the world. And I think where we take a lot of inspiration from is really strong character-driven IPs. So whether that is like a Pokemon, Sanrio, like with Hello Kitty, like Marvel, like these are kind of like the high watermark for us.
Yeah.
Can this be a brand that is pervasive in culture, that people from all ages and all demographics can identify with? That's definitely the goal of where we're trying to go.
There are so many movements in Web3, art, film, music, gaming, loyalty programs, etc. When you think about the intersection of entertainment and technology, what's next for the space? Where do you see it going?
I mean, if I had a crystal ball, I more broadly think, whether this is something I talk a lot to my friends about, for the longest time, crypto adoption overall was focused on infrastructure. We need the infrastructure. In order for us to be able to adopt people into Web3. And, with a lot of the recent developments, particularly as you look at layer 2s, what's going on with Base, account abstraction, the ability to have these like Web 2.5 type platforms and choose your own adventure, like we have the infra. I don't think infra is any longer an issue. It'll continue to develop. Where I think we have the most opportunity for growth is in developing user experiences that really solve a core need for a mainstream audience. When you can put the technology on the back burner and really just focus on starting with the experience and working back to the technology, as Steve Jobs would always say, that's kind of the next evolution that I see. And it's really like how we're focusing on as a brand as well, right? Like we're launching experiences where it doesn't matter your technical acumen. There's an adventure that you can participate in, whether it's using an email address to create your own doodle and buy wearables with a credit card, to enjoying our physical locations at Camp, to diving into our social content. And then maybe you do want to go deeper and you do want to explore the OG ecosystem. Well, then, we have ways for you to set up your own businesses and start events and have a full suite of offerings there. So I really think it's about just like solving a core need and meeting people where they are and recognizing that there is not a one size fits all.
No, I agree 100%. That's been a constant refrain of mine, is that if we are really going to sort of be more far-reaching and get those folks that we want to get into this space, that the technology has to be in the background and the experience has to be in the foreground. So I agree 100%. I only have one more question for you, Austin. I'm so appreciative once again for you taking your time. I'm sure you're pretty busy, so I'm really appreciative that you took some time to chat with me today. As always, our last question is, what does culture mean to you?
Well, thank you for having me. This was really fun, and best of luck with everything. I think for me, culture is something that you just feel every day. It's not marketed. It's not something that has like a big campaign. It's just something that's a part of your day-to-day life. And you know it by like an emotional resonance that you feel, versus, being told that this is culture. If it feels like an ad, it's not culture. Like it needs to ultimately feel organic and be something that people are choosing to spend time with.
Awesome. Wonderful. That's a great answer. Once again, thank you so much, Austin, for spending some time talking to us about what you're working on in Doodles, what you've been doing in the space. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Proof of Culture. Your support really means the world, and you're helping to bring our message to a broader audience. This podcast is written and produced by yours truly. Don't forget, the conversation doesn't end here. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, or any suggestions that you might have. Reach out to me on Twitter at Sian Morson. That's SIANMORSON. And be sure to follow the podcast at proofofcult_pod. Your feedback and engagement really makes a difference and helps us to shape our journey. If you enjoyed today's episode and you found it enlightening, please share it with friends, colleagues, or anyone you know who might be eager to learn more about the cultural landscape in Web3. Your support in spreading the word is invaluable in helping us to grow our community. Our theme songs are A Long Way by Serge Pavkin Music and Titanium by Elysia Beats. Be sure to tune into our next episode where we'll continue to dive deeper into the fascinating facets of culture in Web3. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep cultivating your own proof of culture.